So CUP is very critical. RPM, which is your resale price method, very clear when you can use it when you are a distributor and not a manufacturer. You are buying goods and you are making a sale. That point in time you can use the resale price as a method. Then cost plus, mainly this method is used by the contract manufacturers or the contract service providers because they don't take significant risk in doing the business. They are on contract and therefore their always endeavor is to maximize their return on the cost what they incur rather than their endeavor is never like a full-fledged manufacturer. His endeavor is always to maximize his return on the sales and not on the cost. But for contract manufacturer, his endeavor is always to maximize his return on cost because that's the portion of the cost which is controlling to generate more and more profit. So cost plus is typically used by those who are into the contract manufacturing or contract service providers. And in the Western world, if I may say, this is the most preferred method everybody is using. Cost plus. When you go to the PSM, either the complex nature of transaction is there or transfer of an intangible. And this is very complex method. Because PSM you need to first arrive at what are the routine profits which should be attributed to the parties within the related parties, and then the profits which are generated by the non-routine assets which are known as the non-routine profits. And when you want to determine the non-routine profits, the question itself comes, what are the drivers for generation of that non-routine profit, and the subjectivity comes in. As a result of that, PSM is very rarely used. Very rarely used. And the last one, which is TNMM, actually in India this is the most preferred method. To be honest, this is the most preferred method in India. That is the TNMM. They use TNMM, and I don't say that yes, it is preferred. The reason being, the information which you need for the CUP, if it is internally available, you can make use of it. Or a cost plus, the cost plus may have some issues also because of the accounting. There is no standardized accounting. Someone who is selling the goods, his accounting is selling and distribution of the transportation expense as a part of below the gross margin. Someone is not showing freight output as below the gross margin, but it's a part of his selling price because he is collecting all the money in advance. His selling price includes the freight. His selling price includes the insurance. Then using cost plus method becomes difficult. But when you come down to the TNMM level, that is how you account for it doesn't matter. Ultimately, all these operations are taken care of when it becomes a part of your net profit or the operating margin. Whether you are accounting in different line items, whether you are accounting only as income and not as an expense, it doesn't matter. And therefore, TNMM becomes the most preferred method and easily used in India. But my previous speaker also said, as far as SAP is concerned, try and avoid this method, especially those who are covered by ATI 8 or ATI 10. Because ATI 8 and ATI 10 are the eligible units. They are part of one of the SSC. While comparable companies may be having similar, but that information about the ATI 8 or ATI 10 may not be available at all. So for TNMM, if you want to make use of it, if it is not an ATI 8, ATI 10 or 10AA, yes, one may use the TNMM as a method, especially when only 40 transactions are covered. But when you come into the eligible unit and ineligible unit, try and avoid using this method. And again, when you want to make use of this method, as I said, STD, try and use internal maximum. If it is not possible, then only you go to the external. Any questions so far on functional asset risk analysis or comparability or methods to be used? Okay. Now moving on to the last topic, and this is in relation to the issues in disclosure of Form 3CB from STD perspective. Before we get into the issues or some of the points, I think the most important is what is more relevant from an STD perspective for 3CB. As a part A, because 3CB is now divided into three parts: part A, part B, and the part C. Up to last year, it was only part A and part B. Now it has become part A, B, and C. And as a part of revised Form 3CB, which is effective for year ended March 31st, 2013, the part A, first time they introduced one more line item which is known as aggregate value of the transaction, which is broken up into two parts: international value of transaction and the specified domestic transaction. So that is critical. Aggregate value of transaction. So if you have a purchase, sale, if you have interest, if you have guarantee, whatever, loan, everything, all that aggregation should be considered over there. I do not know what is the reason why they are asking for. One clue which I can get it is the assessments which are being done so far for the international value of transaction. 15 crore if you exceed the value of international transaction is more than 15 crore, then compulsorily scrutiny assessment is done. So if that being the perspective, I do not know, but they want this. So one has to be very careful what kind of aggregate value of transaction is required to disclose. There should not be a duplication. The second one is clause 21, where the PAN of every assessee is required to be disclosed. All the related parties, their PAN is required to be disclosed. While in international transaction, there is no requirement to disclose PAN. It is only for the SDP transaction you have to disclose PAN. So you need to have PAN for all your related parties with you. Then next comes clause 22. Basically, it is the payments what you make to your related parties under section 48(2)(b) of the Income Tax Act. The parties which are covered under 48(2)(b) will get covered under clause 22. Any expenditure, again here there is no income. It is only the expenditure which is required to be considered unless you are covered by as an eligible unit under section 80IA, 10 or 10AA. Otherwise, transfer pricing is applicable only for the expenditure part. Then clause 23A and 23B specifically deals with 80IA in two different forms. One, the purchase from one inter-unit to another inter-unit, and B is from sales from one inter-unit to the another inter-unit. So that is the two separate disclosure under 23A and B. 24 is again if you need to certify whether an assessee is making more than ordinary profits which are covered by section 80I 10 of the Income Tax Act. As a chartered accountant, it is required to be covered as a part of clause 24. And the clause 25, if there are any transaction other than to be specified in clause 22 to 24, those are required to disclose under 25. So these are the clauses for your 3CEB for domestic transactions. Now, some of the important points what one needs to keep it in mind when you are certifying 3CEB or when as a client you are giving information to a chartered accountant for the 3CEB. The value of the transaction which has been booked in the financial statements is only required to be disclosed. Value of transactions which are required to be disclosed, and that is important because aggregate value if you are crossing more than 5 crores of rupees. So what does it mean? If you have made a self-adjustment, will it be covered as a part of the 5 crores? My view, no. But it is required to be appropriately disclosed as a part of 3CEB because there are two columns: value as booked in the books of account and arm's length price. So value as booked in books of account 100, arm's length price 95. That way that arm's length price will get disclosed. But for aggregation as a part of the clause 9, the value as per the books of account is only required to be considered. This is very relevant and critical to understand because clause 9 talks about value as per books of account. Then therefore that's adjustment, self-adjustment, suo motu adjustment, whatever, and that also plays some important role. Like yes, there is no other decision than the IGATE of the Bangalore, where if you have made your own adjustment into the return, then you are eligible to claim. Otherwise, there is a provision. There is a prohibition in getting a deduction under 10AA or 80I 8 or 80I 10. If you are claiming deduction under 80I, IB, IC or the ID, any transfer pricing adjustment, that deduction cannot go up, it may come down. But if you are making your own adjustment, that's a suo motu. Then the values of the loan, should it be disclosed or interest should be disclosed? It is only the interest which is required to be disclosed and not the loan. Again, that is what, because the primary transaction, even if it is loan, but the interest is an expenditure which is covered under 48(2). So that is required to be disclosed and again should form part of your clause 9. Then transaction between two eligible units which are covered under two sub clauses 23A and B. One which is showing sale, another is showing purchase. That is required to be disclosed separately. But when you take aggregate value of transaction as a part of clause 9, it has to be disclosed only once, otherwise there will be a duplication. It is especially when you are covered under ATI 8. That is very critical. Then last, the threshold limit, whether you should show it as a net basis or the gross basis. What I mean by that? VAT or the excise duty what you are paying. Whether excise duty or the VAT what you have paid or going to pay, should it form part of the SDT disclosure or not? It all depends on how you are doing your accounting. If you are doing net of taxes as an accounting, it should be disclosed net of taxes. If you are disclosing gross of tax, you should disclose gross of tax. And that's clearly brought out by the Institute Guidance Note also. It all depends on the method of accounting what you are following. Then identification of transaction relating to the allocation of cost among the eligible unit and non-eligible unit. Again, you need to be extremely careful on that. Difference, this is important part. There cannot be a difference between 3CD disclosure under form 3CD under a clause where you need to disclose 48(2)B transactions or payments made to the parties listed under 48(2)B. There cannot be a reconciliation or difference between that and the SDT. Otherwise, we have a big problem on that. Because if I am saying 48(2)B as a part of the 3CD, then do I have a choice and say now for SDT I am not? If there is an error in disclosure under 3CD for 48(2)B which really is not a 48(2)B party, then you need to keep reconciliation, and therefore interplay between the 3CD and the 3CB, especially for 48(2)B, is very, very critical. Please pay attention to that. So far there have been disclosures what I have seen where actually those are not 48(2)B parties, but the disclosure is happening because they are part of the same group. But they may not be covered for 48(2)B. For international transaction, I can understand the definition is different. Then identification of transaction covered under ATI 10 owing to the close connection between assets eligible and ineligible unit. So close connection, I do not want to dwell too much on it now because the previous speaker has already spoken. But here is an onerous responsibility of a chartered accountant to certify owing to a close connection. And because the business is arranged in such a manner that it is generating more than an ordinary profit, whether it is doing that or not, that is exactly what as a chartered accountant you have to certify in 3CB. So you need to be extremely careful to see whether you meet all the conditions which are there under ATI 10 and then certify yes or no. Because if it is yes, then you have obvious choice but to disclose what is an ordinary profit. And these are last, if there are two auditors who signs 3CEP, now we have to upload it. How do we do it? Both cannot upload it independently. See, when you are signing, you can sign joint, ABC and DCE. But when you are uploading into the system, how can you do it? So it is the common understanding between the two chartered accountants is required who will upload. That's important, very practical issue, but one needs to be careful about that. Any questions? Yes.
PCB, the wordings are used there by the chartered accountant. In PCB, then the particulars are true and correct. Now, transfer pricing, you can't certify arm's length pricing.
You are not supposed to certify arm's length pricing.
But the wording of the audit report, it should be true and fair rather than true and correct. What is the wording?
I do not know because any certification under the Income Tax Act is never true and fair, it is always true and correct.
But how can I certify arm's length?
Exactly, that is where precisely the point is. You are not certifying whether it is at arm's length or not. What you are certifying, in the opinion of the SSC, it is at arm's length price. If you see the two clauses, one which says value as per the books of account, and second what it says arm's length price as determined by the SSC. So job of issuing 3CB actually is compilation of the entire information for the benefit of the scrutiny assessment. You are not supposed to certify that this is an arm's length price. This is a misconception.
Correct. The way the language is used.
Correct, and therefore what I am saying, the information which you are providing is the true and correct. You are not saying that the arm's length price is true and correct. What you are saying, in the view of the SSC, the arm's length price is correct.
As you mentioned about profit level indicator, that there could be three bases: cost, sales, and assets employee. Can the DPO ask that the PLI can the DPO ask that PLI be worked out on all the three? And what happens if one PLI is comparable and the other two PLIs are not comparable?
Really speaking, this situation cannot happen in my view. Either of the three, you can use only two. Either you can use as a cost at the asset, or you can use sale at the asset. Reason being, as I said, when you are calculating the PLI, it is your numerator and the denominator. And when you calculate when you consider the denominator, the tested transaction cannot form part of the denominator. So if you are making a sale, then it has to be only on the cost. You cannot use it as a sales. So I am saying either of the three, two can be used, but you need to justify why asset is not correct. As I said, who is for whom ROI is correct approach. Where the capital intensive industry is only where their objective is to maximize their profits on assets. So what is the return on asset? But if you are a normal manufacturer or the service provider or the distributor, you may not be having a capital intensive. So even if it is shown 3, but then the PLI has to be correct. And that is the decision you need to demonstrate why I am saying the operating margin on operating cost or operating margin on operating income or operating margin on total cost, total assets. And here assets also, very importantly, fixed assets are only to be considered. Unless your industry is such where you need to have huge fixed asset, at the same time there is a huge investment into current assets also, which may not be the case. So even if the TPO asks for 3, you need to justify which is the better one and why.
For clause number 23, A and B, there are 8 TIA units, 8 separate units. And whether we have to aggregate all the sales and purchases for all the units or individually distribution of how we do so.
I think see, when you are looking at the objective of bringing in the specified domestic transaction for ATI 8 units is basically to see whether the profits which is being calculated it has arm's length or not. So there is no tax arbitrage which is claimed by the SSC. That is the purpose. Now, when you look at that, I think you can show it as an aggregate, and by way of a note you can disclose that for unit 1 to 8, these are the values and this is the aggregate what we are disclosing.
And for benchmarking purpose also,
You can aggregate it together if the nature of transactions are same.
In a product, customized product, SSC is doing the customized product, the most standardized product, which is the best method. Take the example of furniture, shelf furniture, wooden furniture. Which method is best for?
But is it into the manufacturing or is it into distribution?
In the distribution.
Then resale price is the only method, better method. Unless you need to go to the C, there is a difference. You can use the resale price method or the TNMM as a method.
In that case, our the system.
I will tell you when you can use it. If you are a pure play simple distributor doesn't taking significant risk in doing the business, this is in the form of marketing, or if you are not taking risk in inventory or the data, then what is your purpose is that you want to maximize your returns on your purchases, and therefore the gross margin should be the correct method, that is resale price. Because under resale price what you compute is a gross margin. But if you are into the distribution, you are spreading into the market, that is your responsibility. The dealer network you need to create, you need to have advertisement and market promotion done. Then the RPM is not the correct method, but the TNMM would be the correct method.
So suppose that we manufacture at a take one unit and we distributed that, a customized product.
But then for that, actually it is not, SDT is not applicable to you. The SDT is applicable to the other party which is purchasing.
Only as a matter of urgent precaution. Because actually it is not, but just to save penalty, I want to report. So how do I report? Because there is no option of more in that you want to see.
See, in receiving, which is the physical form, you can very well give the disclosure. But when you have to upload it into the XML, there is a problem. Because there are no notes which you can give as a part of the XML when you are uploading. So what you can do is that when you are uploading, but as a part of your abandonment precaution, you need to file the report to the TPO saying that actually it is not applicable to me according to me, but voluntarily I am submitting the 3CEB. So effectively what you are doing, we are giving an opportunity to the TPO also to verify whether really the SDD is applicable to you or not. So practical issue could be in the form of uploading the 3CEB into the website, but there cannot be a problem when you are giving a physical copy of the 3CEB to the TPO.
So in the case of the API unit, disclose the goods purchase. In the case of the API unit, the goods purchase from a related party, whether they have to disclose in the API clause 24 and in the clause 24 as a 42B again for the API unit,
Which is API 8 or
API B unit, right?
But are you covered by API? Will you get covered by API 8 or will you get covered by API 10?
And
Yeah, then 24 you need to disclose.
then in that they will disclose in that also and they will disclose in the 48 to
Yes.
Part C of the form